Once you get to the repeat method, it becomes really handy to make reuse of some methods that you've written previously in SillyString. So you've done all the hard work to add some capabilities, and now we're going to get to reuse some of those capabilities. To give you a sense of how this works, I want to walk you through the creation of a method that isn't like repeat, but has something kind of similar. So what if we wanted to make a method that would take any given string we want, like say the silly string A is assigned a new silly string whose characters are going to be Carol, and make a palindrome out of that particular silly string. And so what we expect to see is after we call makePalindrome, we think B is going to be assigned a new silly string. And when we go and test this, what we're expecting to see is that the contents of B are going to have the contents of A with the contents of A repeated in reverse, right? So Carol will be made a palindrome by reversing those letters and appending them to the end. Well, it turns out at this point in the problem set, you've written a method to do the reversal of a string, and you've written the method to combine two strings together. And so now all that's left is taking those two capabilities and reusing them in a method that we'll write called makePalindrome. So if I were to run this code right now, what we would see is that we're actually getting null back from that call because null is being returned in this sort of stub of a method that we've got set up. And that leads to an error that we'll discuss in class on Tuesday. What is a null pointer exception? So we've got this makePalindrome class, right? And we want to take the current string and append it to the reversed version of the current string. So the first thing to remember, and we talked about this in class on on Thursday, is that this, in this case, refers to the object that a method was called on. So in this case, makePalindrome is the method that is being called on A. And so this over here is going to refer to A when this method call is executed. So what we want to do is we want to set up, well, let's go ahead and sort of make a place to hold the reversed version of this silly string. So let's set up a variable silly string, and we'll call this reversed, and we're going to assign to reversed this dot reverse. Right? And so this is going to call the reverse method, which you implemented previously, and reverse returns to us a new silly string that contains all of the characters of whatever object we asked for. Well, we asked for this, which again, because we called a.makePalindrome, when we jump to makePalindrome, this is going to refer to A in this particular instance. So this is referring to the object that the method was called on, and we're going to assign to this reversed variable whatever that outcome is. Okay, so maybe let's try just returning reversed and seeing what happens. So when we run this now, we'll see that we expected Carol Lorak, but we just got Lorak. So we're only returning the reversed version, and we can see that where we expected true, because we expect that B is going to be a palindrome after we've called this method on A and assigned its result to B, but it's not doing that currently. So we've got the reversed part. Well, how do we add the current string to the reversed string? So then we need to make reuse of our concatenate method. So let's set up another string called, say, result. And what we want to do is take me and call my concatenate method with the reversed string on the end of it. Okay, and so we're saying I'm going to concatenate to myself the reverse string, and I'm going to give you back a new string that you are assigning to result. Because remember, concatenate and reverse, they don't change the string that you're calling these methods on. They're just setting up new strings that we're going to work with. So rather than return reversed, let's return result. All right, and let's see what happens here. So we run this code, and we see we expected Carol Lorak, and we got Carol Lorak. We expected true when we called is palindrome on B, and we got true. So A, we said, hey A, make palindrome, And the way that we made our palindrome was first we set up a variable to hold the reversed version of ourself, and then we called concatenate on this, concatenated the reversed version to this, and returned that. So this is an example of how you use this dot to call methods on the same object that a method was called in, and so you can get reuse of the methods that you've written previously. This is going to be super handy in repeat and join and splice when you get there. I want to show one other thing, which is something that we haven't really discussed explicitly. Everywhere that there's an expression, remember, you can substitute anything of the same type. So here we have an expression, which is a variable reference. We are referencing the reversed method. And notice that reversed is just a variable whose type is silly string. So anything that is a silly string, we can substitute here. So we don't actually have to call or refer to this variable inside of here, or even set up a variable for it. We can actually call this method directly as an argument of this method call and get rid of this initial variable. All right, so this is exactly the same thing as what we had before. But now notice that when we try to assign to result, we're going to call the concatenate method. But before we can call the concatenate method, we need to figure out, well, what is the result of calling reverse? So we call reverse, we get back a reversed silly string, and now we're going to take that reversed silly string and give it to concatenate. So this is nesting a method call inside of an argument. Okay, so here we're using as an argument a method call. The same idea applies down here in our return expression. So here we're returning an expression of type silly string. We have to do that because this method says, hey, we're going to give you back a silly string. So it turns out we don't even have to store this result in a variable either. Because concatenate is giving us back a silly string, we could return that directly as well. And so here we've got something that's pretty concise. We're saying return the result of concatenating me with reversing me, right? And so this is actually a pretty concise, pretty nice little method that has the exact same semantics or the exact same outcome as before. So let's try running this and seeing if we're still there. We expected Carol Lorak, we got Carol Lorak, we expected true when we called is palindrome on the resulting palindrome, and we got it back. And notice this is going to work no matter what name I plug into this original silly string, right? So this is an example of how you can reuse methods you've already written to save you some work and time and effort in implementing new methods in the future. This is why we tend to start by building small methods that do very specific things and constructing larger and larger methods that do more complex things using those simpler ideas.